Hi, everybody. My name is Will Hamlin, and along with my colleague Josh Coulson, I'm here today to talk about Moneyball for talent acquisition. And Josh and I work on the Insights team at LinkedIn. And the Insights team, our charter, is to harness the vast wealth of LinkedIn data and make all of you successful. And this is something that I'm personally very passionate about for two reasons. The first reason is that I honestly and truly believe that talent is the biggest long-term driver of a company's success. The second reason is that I'm a big nerd, and I just really like numbers. And so when I was preparing for the presentation today, Hari gave some awards to each of, to Benjamin and Eric and four of you who are very heavily involved. But I wanted to know what companies were really involved. And I wanted to give the same four awards. So which company has their employees join LinkedIn the earliest of all the companies in the room? F5 Networks. Give F5 a round of applause. All right, now which company is the most connected, has the highest number of average connections? Salesforce. Salesforce. Give Salesforce a round of applause. OK, most popular. Which companies has their profiles visited more than any others in the room? Mubadala Petroleum. All right. I think they're sitting over there. Finally, most endorsed. Which company has their members been endorsed the most times? Tanker Pacific. Give them a round of applause. And so the same way that I looked at the data about the companies in the room to learn a little bit more about them, about 15 years ago, the Oakland A's started doing this in the sport of baseball. And I'm an American, but I want to tell you guys a secret. I hate baseball. Baseball is boring. But Moneyball, it's not about baseball. It's about talent. And it's about how the Oakland A's use data to evaluate talent. And they were incredibly successful. They had much less money than other teams. But for years, they won the division and they won the wild card. And they competed with teams who had 5 times more money to spend. And in 2003, Michael Lewis wrote a book called Moneyball about the Oakland A's. And again, love the book. It's about data. It really appeals to me. But I got really excited when 2 years ago, they came out with the movie. Because I saw that Brad Pitt was in the movie. And so I thought, yes, Brad Pitt is going to play the data analyst. Finally! The world's sexiest man. I'm going to have my day in the sun. And then I saw the movie. And he doesn't play a data analyst. He plays an ex-jock general manager, Billy Beane. So I thought, it's OK. They'll probably get Ryan Gosling, right? You know, I copied his hair. OK. They didn't get Ryan Gosling. They got this guy. So rather than being the Brad Pitt of LinkedIn, I'm the Jonah Hill of LinkedIn, which is really, really not what I was hoping for. But again, the key message of Moneyball is that the Oakland A's use data to evaluate talent in a way that's actually pretty similar to the challenge that faces you all every day. They were evaluating baseball players. You're evaluating salespeople, financial analysts, software engineers. And so the same way that 15 years ago, data transformed the game of baseball, we think it's time for data to transform talent acquisition. And there's a phrase that we use a lot at LinkedIn that's very near and dear to my heart, which is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And our leaders talked about it at the previous panel, but the idea is that without objective quantitative measures, it's much harder to dial up and dial down programs and see what's successful. And if you think about a lot of your peers, this has been easier for a while. CFO has income statements, balance sheets. Head of sales has the quarterly numbers to look at. In HR, this has been hard, but we think it's time to change that. And today we'll talk a little bit about how. However, it's still early days. Only 37% of Southeast Asian talent acquisition leaders think their organization uses data well when hiring. So if this makes you a little uncomfortable or a little nervous, you're actually in the majority. This is new. This is change. And so where we think this can start is with the LinkedIn profile. And so here's a profile of Joanna. And there's 3 things about profiles like Joanna and the other members that can help change this. Number one, breadth. 225 million members, the largest professional network in history. But that's not anything without depth. Look at Joanna's profile. You see where she worked, where she used to work, what function she's in, where she went to school, where she lives. The depth of those profiles allows you to slice and dice to really granular cuts. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that today. And finally, it's real time. More than 2 new members a second. New member, new member, new member, new member. As we speak, it's constantly updating, so you have the latest and greatest data. So today, we'll talk about how you can use LinkedIn data to do 3 things. Looking at the hiring funnel, first, how you can plan using talent pool analysis. Next, how you can prioritize engaged talent and measure your talent brand. And finally, some tips on how you can put it all into practice. I'll have my colleague Josh Coulson come on stage.
So first of all, let's talk about how you can plan using LinkedIn data. Let's take UOB. So UOB are hiring a lot of financial services and banking professionals in Singapore and Southeast Asia, and what is an incredibly competitive talent market. So we all know that there are a number of financial services companies and large banks headquartered here in Singapore and around Southeast Asia. So it's an incredibly competitive place to be looking for these professionals. So the first way that you can use LinkedIn data is to set expectations with hiring managers. So we have a concept in the recruiting world, and it's an American concept, of a purple squirrel. Essentially, a candidate that is incredibly hard to find. Raise your hand if you've ever worked with a hiring manager who's asked you to find a candidate who's virtually non-existent. We've got a couple, we've got a few, about 50%. I'm guessing everyone else is a hiring manager. Excellent, excellent. Now, so the first way we can do this, the first way we can use LinkedIn data is to set expectations. We can go back to our hiring manager and we can tell them exactly how many are in that talent pool, exactly how hard it's going to be for you, or easy, it's going to be for you to find someone. And the way we do that is with LinkedIn Recruiter. Now, I know most of you are already well aware of LinkedIn Recruiter, but for those of you who are not, it's got information available to you as recruiters on our 225 million members in the breadth and the depth that Will was talking about. So what we can do is actually accurately measure how many people are in that talent pool. We can set expectations with the hiring manager. So let's go back to UOB. Now, let's go a little bit sideways on the financial services. Let's say we've been asked for a classic purple squirrel. Let's say we've been asked for a international lawyer, maybe speaks Mandarin, living in Singapore, 10 years experience in the financial services or banking industries. Sounds pretty tough. Let's have a look. Here's Recruiter. I'm going to use some keywords. International law and Mandarin. Let's find these lawyers. 325 Mandarin-speaking lawyers in Singapore. That sounds okay. Let's cut it down. Let's go a bit more fine. There's about 39 in financial services and banking industry. That sounds okay. More than 10 years experience? Only 11. That sounds like a classic purple squirrel. But then again, that might not be all that difficult. If we go any more fine, if that criteria was any more specific, I think we might have some problems. So what we can do is go back to that hiring manager and we can explain, if we expand our criteria, we're going to find it a lot easier. As a data guy, my maths should be right here, Will. 38 or 325. We can make sure that that talent pool that we're hiring in is going to make sure that we're efficient. Or we can explain to the hiring manager exactly when we're going to find it really competitive. So the next way we've been using LinkedIn data is we've been working with our largest customers to take this to the next level. We've been doing this on a strategic level. We've been helping our strategic customers actually measure the demand for talent. So just as you can use Recruiter to assess the supply for talent, we can now actually look at the demand for talent. So the way we do this is with aggregate recruiter information. So all of your activity, all of your team's activity on LinkedIn.com using Recruiter, we aggregate all that and we look at what different talent pools are actually most in demand. And not only most in demand, but we can compare the demand between different talent, between different industries. So here today, we've shown a little bit of an example of how we do this. Now, we do this to help companies, help our largest customers, actually identify where they're going to find talent, exactly like you're doing with the recruiter, exactly how competitive they're going to find it to be recruiting in this talent pool. Again, how competitive or how efficient it's going to be. So let's have a look. So here's the finance industry. Now, finance industry, we can see, we know, anecdotally, it's the largest market for talent in Singapore. And the demand is relatively high. But let's have a look at the technology industry. Supply isn't necessarily as large, but the demand is well above where it is for the finance industry. What we can now do is also compare professional services. More members in the technology industry, but less demand. So what does this mean? So we can now help our largest customers when they are looking at their recruitment strategy, when they're looking for strategic initiatives. We can help them identify markets for talent. So first of all, how can you use data to plan? First of all, most powerfully, use LinkedIn data to set expectations with your hiring managers. Second of all, use it to identify markets for talent. Let's move on to prioritizing. So once you've identified the right people, how do you work out if they're interested in you? Let's take a little bit of an example. Let's say we're looking for software engineers. Now, we've got this guy on the left. He looks incredibly intelligent because he's obviously working at a computer in the 70s. But he doesn't look particularly enthusiastic, and his excitement levels look pretty average. If you're going to be contacting him about a potential job opportunity, you might struggle to get a response. What we're looking for is guys that look like this. Uber excited. He's going to be jumping out of his chair. And despite the bow tie and the suspenders, when you contact him, he's going to be down your throat with a response. Exactly what you want. But how do you measure that? How do you measure that excitement or the engagement with you as an employer? So we've done some thinking. Let's look at Siemens. Let's look at the way Siemens engages with their members. Winnie here and her colleagues have over 36,000 people looking at their profiles every month. That's a staggering number, but 36,500 people looking at their profiles every month that are understanding what it's like to work at Siemens. They are familiar with what it's like to work there. They know people there. So Siemens takes that 36,000 people and then engages them with relevant content. It drives them to their careers page, where they have rich media and targeted content. Siemens also has over 270,000 followers. Now, this is real time. I actually checked this before. They're actually up closer to 280,000. Staggering growth rate. So what does Siemens do with that number? Siemens actually engages these people with relevant status updates, targeted, of course. We can cut down with that, the breadth and depth where we were talking about before. And they engage those 270,000 members with information about what it's like to work at Siemens. So they're engaging those members. So we'd show these kind of numbers to organizations, and they'd obviously recognize that these are fantastic opportunities. But they wanted to know from us what it all means. Is 270,000 followers good? Obvious answer is yes, but what does that mean? What is the context? And how does this, more importantly, help me understand how efficient or how competitive it's going to be when I'm competing for talent against my competitors? So we put our heads together. We came up with a simple way to tie it all together. And that's where the Talent Brand Index came from. So I'm going to take you through the Talent Brand Index and using Siemens as an example. Now, there's two elements to the Talent Brand Index. First of all, the reach. We measure how many members are familiar with your company as a place to work. Secondly, we talk about engagement again. We look at how many members are engaging with your company, how many members are interested in your company as a place to work. And that's important. Let me just illustrate that as separate to any other interest. Now, I'm an Aussie, so naturally I love beer. And when I walk into and I do spend a bit of time in Singapore, so when I walk into a bar up here, I usually get pretty excited when I see an Australian beer on tap. My wife says that I'm a little bit over-engaged with some of the Australian beer brands. Now, that engagement is that consumer brand. I've got no idea what it's like to work at any of these beer companies. On the other hand, I've got a number of mates who work at some of Australia's largest law firms. And whilst the pay's okay, the incredible hours and the off-the-chart expectations means that the catered dinner every night isn't exactly complimentary. But I'm familiar with what it's like as a place to work. So what we did, we actually went away and we asked our members. We asked them about potential employers, and we asked them, are you familiar with this company as a place to work? Are you engaged with this company? Would you be interested in talking to them about a job? And then we went back and we had a look at their activity. And we tied their activity back to those two pools. So what we can say is that members that are familiar with your company as a place to work are viewing your employee profiles or connecting with your employees. I mean, it makes sense. If they know someone at your company, they're going to be aware of you. Then we looked at engagement. And the activity that correlates with engagement is members that are researching your company, following your company, viewing your jobs and applying for them. So for Siemens, let's go back to Siemens. We've got some huge numbers here. 3.4 million members are aware of Siemens as an employer. So that's 3.4 million members that are viewing Siemens members' employees' profiles or connecting with them. Of that number, over 500,000 of them are engaged with Siemens. They're interested in what it's like to work at Siemens. So we take those two numbers, we tie them both together, and we calculate the one number that we think really matters, the Talent Brand Index. That is the number of members that are familiar with you as a place to work, who are engaged with you, who are interested about you as a place to work. So for Siemens, that's 16%. Now, because this is based on LinkedIn data, it's real time. It's deep and it's broad, which means that we can compare it to your competitors, for instance. We can explain exactly how hard it's going to be for you when you're competing for talent against your peers. Anonymized, of course, in this example, but we can go into that. We can then have a look internally. This is where it gets really sharp. We can look at exactly how hard it's going to be for you to be hiring across your functional areas. So for instance, for Siemens here, we can make the conclusion that sales and engineering professionals are going to be more interested in Siemens than, for instance, IT or HR. We can cut down to that level. And because it's real-time data, we can measure it over time. We can benchmark it. This becomes really important when we start to discuss ROI, when we start to discuss the impact of programs, campaigns, etc. So now I'm actually really excited here at this point. I get the chance to actually announce the top 20, using this data, I'm pretty excited about, the top 20 most in-demand employers in Singapore. First time this has been done. Let's see if it works. It's the top 10. That's okay. I can work with that. So here we are, the top 10 most in-demand employers for Singapore. Now, most of these, we've got a lot of multinational corporates here, and that's okay, but I'm really excited there's some strong local brands as well. So that's fantastic. Congratulations to anyone on this list. So prioritizing. So make sure you're using, you can prioritize to identify engaged candidates, so you can measure how many candidates are engaged and aware of you. You can use it to benchmark against peers, to explain exactly how competitive or efficient it's going to be when you're competing against them. And you can also use it to diagnose strengths and weaknesses that might be relevant and evident in your talent brand. I'm now going to hand back to Will, who's going to take you through how to put that all together into practice.
Thanks, Josh. So finally, we'll close out with some tips on how you can operationalize this and put it all into practice. And I think the first thing I would emphasize is that you can keep it simple. To the question that was asked earlier about how to do this in a smaller organization, there's lots of small incremental things you can do on a day-to-day basis. So for example, just look at the data. When you're starting to hire for a requisition, what is the size of the talent pool? Like literally, how big is it? How large? Is it a purple squirrel or a pack or a herd of squirrels? The larger it's going to be, the easier of a time you're going to have. Next, how well are you engaging talent? Do your potential candidates look like the grumpy software engineer from the 70s or the excited nerd in the bow tie and the suspenders? The better you're engaging talent, the easier it's going to be. Just start to look at the data. Next, do you need to create an entirely new workflow? Not right away. It's about changing your existing workflow, about updating it. So if you're a recruiter, you can look at the data to plan based on the size of the talent pool or prioritize engaged talent. For the talent acquisition leaders in the room, it's about challenging your team. It's about asking for the right questions. When someone says, I really can't hire for this position, just say, how large is it? Show me the data. When someone says, we're really having trouble engaging, well, how many people are you engaging? Ask for the data. And then finally, I wanted to share a tip about how we do this internally. We have a couple of our recruiting team here. And what we've done is we've actually taken operations and analytics professionals and embedded them in the talent acquisition organization. So this is a little sophisticated, and maybe not everyone's ready there, but if you think your organization is leading edge here, we've found this to be very successful, because then rather than asking for help from other organizations, you can actually bring them in to measure, manage, and iterate. So to quickly summarize, three simple ways you can operationalize talent analytics. First, start using the data and keep it simple. Second, enhance your existing workflow. And third, for the really sophisticated organizations, create the right team structure and actually embed them within your organization. So to summarize, hopefully you should now know how to use data to plan by looking at talent pool analysis, prioritize your talent brand, and a little bit about how to put it all into practice. And now, in closing today, I want to talk a little bit about the future and about what we see coming next. So now you can verify skills by using endorsements. So Samir is one of the attendees who happens to be very heavily endorsed. Since we've released endorsements 6 months ago, there have been more than 1 billion endorsements on the platform. And I want to address a concern that I sometimes hear about endorsements, which usually goes something like this. My Aunt Martha endorsed me for skill X, and how does she know that I have skill X? Because my Aunt Martha is blind, or whatever the case may be. It's not about the individual endorsements. It's about 1 billion endorsements now, billions of endorsements later, and about the scale that that can achieve. Let's take an example. Look at Samir. Samir is actually an HR professional. He doesn't specialize in talent acquisition. And so his top skill is talent management. And then you look down his profile, succession planning, organizational design, human resources. You can tell by looking at where Samir is most endorsed, where his skills are and where he's leading. And where this becomes really powerful is, let's take an example of data analysis, a skill that you've probably gathered is very near and dear to my heart. All of these are folks at LinkedIn who are endorsed for data analysis. But what we really care about as a company is this good? How does it compare to our peers? How well endorsed are they for that skill? Do we need to catch up? Should we be worried? Or internally, how does it vary by geography, by function? How does our Asia Pacific team do compared to Europe or North America? By looking at this can be a measure of both your organization externally, as well as the skills you have internally, and where you may need to improve or focus. However, in closing, I want to bring it back to the phrase I said at the beginning, which is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We think now, in 2013, LinkedIn can help you measure it and manage it. Thank you very much for your time.